Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we will be recapping the season finale of YellowJackets. At the top of the episode, I will have a solo recap of the episode, general opinions, and then a conversation with Sona in which we discuss some of the finer details, what we liked and didn't like in the season and in the finale itself, and what we think might be coming up in the next season. As always, make sure to subscribe to us so you know when new episodes become available, give us a review, and or recommend us to one of your friends, someone who might appreciate the conversation. In the feed recently, you've probably seen just this weekend, I dropped my review of the new Scream movie, and previously in a Dexter recap, I had also included my history with the Scream franchise up until this point. And of course, in that same Scream 5 review episode, I had a conversation with Sona, very entertaining conversation, in which she spoke about her recent rewatch of the first two Scream movies herself. Also, you'll notice that we have started putting out musical episodes again, and just recently covering the pivotal 1991 to 1992 chart week in which Nirvana knocked Michael Jackson's album out of number one, and a lot of the music that was happening, the trends, and how a lot of the music of the 80s was fading as alternative and other genres were peaking in the early 90s. Speaking of the 90s, of course, we're at the 25th anniversary in the YellowJackets show itself, and there's a lot of 90s music in there, and you'll be hearing some of it. I'll be excerpting it here. And they have been using good use of music in general, and I do enjoy the music of the 90s. And I know there's been a lot of nostalgia for the 80s for the past few years, and maybe it's time that we start seeing more nostalgia of the 90s. I have a feeling that is going to be a trend. And if you are a music fan, make sure you check out previous music episodes in this same feed, where Ian and I discuss the career of Prince. We discuss Harry Nilsson. There's an episode that goes through Chris Cornell's career on the anniversary of his untimely death. And we also have episodes where we play covers for each other. I love covers because you get to see like the whole history of music and artist influences in little bite-sized snack packs. So track those down. It's all in the same feed. And I hope you find something you enjoy. And in my conversation with Sona, we will start discussing what our next recap show is going to be. So with that out of the way, let's get to the recap.
Nat, I know what it's like. The numbness, the paranoia. Sometimes I look at the world around me and it's like all the light has just gone out of it. Maybe Travis just couldn't stand to live like that anymore. And maybe you need to start trying to forgive him.
So the title of the finale is, and pardon my Latin, by the way, Sic Transit Gloria Mundi, I believe, more or less, which roughly translates to, thus passes the glory of the world. Now, a little bit about this phrase. This is actually the phrase used, or previously used, and perhaps maybe still used, I'm not 100% sure on this, on the swearing in of the new pope. And it's supposed to symbolize that the pope is relinquishing worldly pleasures, but also symbolizing that worldly pleasures, the world itself, is transitory, that this is a transitory phase. So what does it mean in the context of the show? And I'm assuming that you have, if you're listening to this, you have seen it, so spoilers, warning. But I think in a thematic way, these women have lost their connection to the world. This trauma of their youth has stolen those worldly pleasures from them. But more importantly, I think we are seeing Lottie rising to the head of this new religion. And for Lottie to rise, we need someone to fall. And the previous leader of the group, Jackie, is the sacrificial lamb here, but that's a transition we're seeing in this episode. So we open with, we see the girls, this is the aftermath of their doom coming. Teen Shauna, by the way, suddenly looks more pregnant. They probably upgraded her, the size of her pregnancy belly, and they're dealing with the consequences. They're kind of, this is the aftermath of the crazy episode we saw last week, where there was many transgressions, all due, at least partially due, to them being dosed by Misty. In the present day, we do see Misty, and I really enjoyed seeing her at work. She's actually there to get the supplies she needs to clean up this body, Adam's body. But I liked seeing her interact with her coworkers. You know, she's super chipper and pleasant, but they don't seem to necessarily be annoyed with her presence. If anything, they seem a little scared that she's there. So I like this little insight into what her interactions with her coworkers are. And when you need to dispose of a body, apparently you need to call Misty. She seems to know what she's doing here. She knows that home use bleach is not enough to dispose of a body. She's an online sleuth, and she's seen all the documentaries. She's read all the blogs. She knows how to get away with murder. Misty shows up at Adam's apartment. She tries to be as chipper as she possibly can be about this body disposal. And you see, this is very interesting to see the women interacting here, all 4 of them together. Their same toxic dynamic playing out again. And they ask Shauna if she knows how to dispose of a body. And this is further evidence that, if there was any question mark, and I was mentioning in the previous recap with Sona, that we're not even 100% sure if there was actual cannibalism, although it's obviously been hinted at many times. But I guess this is even more evidence to the case where she says, I know what I'm doing. This is just like riding a gross bike. So she's back on that bike again, disposing of Adam's body, which can't be, she was in a relationship with this guy and maybe even had feelings for him. This can't be an easy thing for her to do. And we do see a little bit of that later. And then maybe this is the thematic point of this whole episode. There's a moment here where there's a question as to whether they're all fucked in the head or if this is real. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out as viewers as well, right? Is this all something that's just happening in their minds? Are they just so messed up from all this PTSD, from all this trauma, that they are permanently damaged, and this bizarre world they think they're living in is not real? This is all in their imaginations. Or is it real? And I guess that's what we're trying to figure out, and that's the thing that's messing with their minds the most. In the midst of this, also this continuing body disposal, Misty says something very funny, which she says, oh, I just got deja vu. Now, I don't know if that's an innocent deja vu or if it's just like, hey, we've been down this road so many times. This is just deja vu yet again. Another great quote from Misty's.
Then after that, what if an animal digs him up? What if a hiker's dog sniffs him out?
Well, what matter? Torsos are useless. Duh. That's the whole point. You only have to worry about the head and the hands.
So what's the plan with those?
Don't worry about it. I'll handle that.
Torsos are useless. Duh. Of course, we all know this, that as long as the head and hands are missing, they're really not going to be able to identify the body. Well, Misty knows this for sure. Back in flashback again, I was surprised, by the way, I was going to mention this last week as well, but Van's scars are surprisingly stylish. She's not that disfigured by this, and I have a big question that she didn't get any kind of infections in her mouth. It's your mouth. No infections on the wound, but anyway, they must have done a very good job of stitching her up because she has healed pretty well, and the scar's not even that bad looking, to be honest with you. Misty's kind of on the outs here in this same continuing flashback sequence because it's revealed that she was the one who inadvertently dosed everybody, but inadvertently, yes, but why did she have the mushrooms? And B, once she saw the mushrooms go into the soup, why didn't she intercede in some case? She could have just accidentally, quote unquote, knocked the soup off the fire and could have prevented a lot of this. And then a very strange thing happens. A bear wanders into camp. Lottie had already predicted that they wouldn't be hungry for long, that she'd seen something. This bear enters camp, wanders directly up to Lottie, well, or I should say Lottie approaches, but walks right into her, and practically sacrifices itself to it, just lays right in front of her, and she stabs it in the neck and kills it. And of course, this gives them plenty of work to do, first of all, but also plenty of food to eat. Now, is the bear sick? This is not normal behavior for a bear. Or is there something supernatural going on here? And of course, Lottie has, most of the interactions with Lottie would lend credence to the fact that she has some kind of true vision. But we need to see for sure. Now we cut to present day, and the reunion is kicking off. This is the night of their reunion. The girls are literally, delayed from the reunion by the fact that they are disposing of this body. Their friend Allie, who didn't go on the plane, is emceeing this reunion. And she's saying some pretty crazy things here. She's mentioning how the 25 year is the sweet spot. 10 years, it's too early. 20 years, everyone's busy with their kids. 25 years, this is pay dirt. This is when the really juicy stuff happens. And when you think about it, this class and, these girls specifically that were on that plane have the juiciest 25th anniversary story imaginable, especially when you consider the current context. Meanwhile, we see what are Natalie, Misty, Ty, and Shauna up to. Misty has gone to the funeral of the woman that she discovered had passed earlier in the episode. And no one seems to know her there. The family's like, why are you here? Who are you? She never mentioned you before. You don't know anything about my mother, the way that she describes her. But of course, we know that she's there to dispose of the head and hands. She knows what she's doing, and she put it into the coffin. So the girls are all, I call them girls, but our protagonists are all traumatized anew. We see Shauna in the shower crying. She's probably the most traumatized by all of this. And of course, in the background of all this is the fact that this is also the night that Taissa is going to find out whether she won the election or not. And she's assuming she's lost, given the polls and given her current confidence. In flashback, Ty and Van are having a conversation. Van is trying to explain to Taissa that she saw something when she was between life and death. She saw a figure there. There was someone else with them. And Taissa, who should know better because she's had supernatural visions of her own that she's trying to run from, is trying to rationalize what Van believes happened, but Van's not having it.
I think something really, really scary happened to you. And you're trying to deal with it. I get that, but Van...
I saw something, Ty. After it happened. I don't think I was dead, but I wasn't really alive either. I think I was like in between or something.
You were in shock. Your body was...
No. I know what I saw. I don't know what it meant, but I know I saw something. Something was out there with us.
Okay, so you had a near-death experience. Now you believe in what? Ghosts? Tree demons? Wood sprites? Come on.
Don't do that. I get that you're scared too. But don't act like you have any clue what's happening out here. Because you don't.
Van says, I know what I saw. I know what I feel. Natalie's trying to deal with the fact that maybe Travis really did kill himself. He's messed up from what happened. She's messed up from what happened. There's a very funny scene where Shauna runs into Randy at the reunion, and he tries to play it off like, hey, Shauna, how are you? And she's not having any part of it. And Shauna basically threatens his life.
Shit. He told you, didn't he?
If you ever tell anyone what the two of you did, I will fucking end you. I will gut you like a pig, and if they find your body, which they won't, it won't matter, because you will be unfucking recognizable. Understand?
So you're mad then?
Yeah, Randy, I'm mad. And I can't be mad at Jeff right now, so looks like it's you. Thank you so much.
I get that.
Good. You're a good friend.
You're a good friend. Because Randy did stand by Jeff, and Jeff was probably the perpetrator or mastermind behind this whole crazy scheme. So that's the duality of Shauna right there. And then Allie trying to take the spotlight away from these girls, who obviously are the stars of the show, whether they want to be or not, has this opening speech where she talks about, we have been through so much, and let's talk about these heroes. And they play a montage to Enya's Only Time. You could just see that nobody's comfortable with this. In flashback, we see a confrontation between Jackie and Shauna. We see this religious zealotry starting to grow within members of the group. And we see there's factions that are in favor, some are not. The one who's most outspoken, and really, this is the end of the line for her, is Jackie, who really should be thinking about her self-preservation when she sees all those sidelong glances at her from the crew. But she has a point. First of all, she goes, are we going to pretend that everything that happened last night didn't happen? You guys almost killed Travis. And then Shauna turns it on Jackie saying, well, he wasn't yours to have. And Jackie says, oh yeah, Shauna? Well, I know what you had been doing with Jeff. I know how you got pregnant. And eventually Shauna just gets mad because she's like, oh, you read my diary? And Jackie's like, well, you're still the one who did the wrong thing first. So they both have a legitimate case to make here, but Jackie's the one who ends up kicked out of the cabin. She's definitely on the way out. Now this intercuts with the class reunion where they mention that Jackie was the prom queen and she should be the one who's dancing with Jeff. But Shauna will dance in her place, which of course, more salt in the wound for Shauna, who's remembering this interaction between her and Jackie. And we see Jackie out trying to start a fire. She's the one who's got kicked out. And we see a vision. I'm not sure if we're supposed to read this as a vision that Jackie has as she dies, or that Shauna has, a nightmare she has, or both. But basically it's the middle of the night and the door is opened. Shauna comes to get Jackie, brings her back inside. And this is when Jackie realizes, as everybody is friendly to her, even sees some of our dead castmates, that she is dying. Shauna wakes up in a start, looks out the window, and it has snowed overnight. And Jackie's fire's out, and Jackie has died in the cold. So now we know how Jackie died. And will she be eaten? Maybe. Don't waste that meat. Maybe she is the first. Also in flashback, interspersed here, we see that Travis is out looking for Javi, so we don't know where Javier is. And just to round things off, we see that Misty, who's been holding this fixer woman, this journalist / fixer, has been held by Misty in her basement for quite some time. And Misty's decided to let her go. And stupidly, by the way, she asks Misty for those cigarettes. And she lets her leave. But she smokes a cigarette and kills her, or at least knocks her out. I would assume she's trying to kill her because just knocking her out temporarily is not going to help her in this circumstance. But why would you take those cigarettes, man? No matter how bad you're jonesing for a cigarette, you never take a cigarette from Misty. I would never take, for sure. And she should know better. I also don't understand this weird way that Misty's doing this. If she had not gone with the cigarettes, if she had walked out and just done the right thing and just walked out the door and then bought some cigarettes, then she wouldn't have died. Misty's leaving a lot up to the chance that she would actually have to jones for a cigarette immediately after leaving and wouldn't just go and buy a new pack instead of being like, screw this, I'm not going to smoke these things. So that caveat aside, a plot hole that I really don't think is necessary. And then we see that Jeff and Shauna are like close again. They've done this terrible thing together, and somehow it's brought them together again. There's a funny scene where Shauna mentions that she'd like to have a cat.
I think cats are underrated. Yeah.
Well, I hope this cat behaves itself. Wind up in the chili pot.
Weirdo.
Hey, what's up, Kokomo?
What is happening right now?
Why are you guys so friendly all of a sudden? What's happening here? And of course, they're waiting to see what the results of the election are, to see if Taissa's won or not. And then the news comes up that Adam's missing. And at first you see like no reaction on the daughter's face, but they're kind of looking at her sideways going like, does she know who that is? Does she know what it is? But then like in that final shot, it seems like she's like, what the hell is going on? She does know who Adam is. The parents are a little too chummy now. Has some crazy toxic interactions like this happened before? Why is she so nonplussed by this? And then as the episode ends, we have seen Taissa preparing to concede the election, but the results come in, it's close, but she wins. And simultaneously, her wife, who's not ready to make amends on the phone, is in the house just getting the last of things together and finds some crazy shrine with the son's doll and the head of the dog. The dog has been beheaded and has been put into... How big is this house, by the way? This is like a whole extra area in the house. But apparently, this is not just sleepwalking. There's something way wrong with Taissa. And now she's about to be elected to office. So problematic to say the least. And then, at the very end of the episode, we see that poor Nat is about to kill herself. She's accepted the fact that maybe Travis just couldn't take it anymore. And maybe she can't take it anymore either. And just as she's about to pull the trigger, a bunch of cult members apparently jump in and they have the symbol around their necks. So this is not all in their heads. Something bigger is going on here, but it still remains to be seen whether this is something supernatural or not. We also find out in this last moments, as she has a missed call from that banker friend of hers, that Lottie was the one who emptied out his bank account. So Lottie has some kind of crazy cult of people who are following her. And are these some of the same survivors? Remains to be seen. And once again, is Lottie just a kook who's charismatic? Is she really having visions? And is there something even darker brewing out in those woods? And we end on what could be a coronation scene. We see that Lottie is in the woods making a sacrifice of the heart of the bear. And this is the moment where her cult begins, perhaps. So many questions for Sona. I have mixed opinions about this episode, but I will leave all of that, my final opinions, to my conversation with Sona, which will start right after this short break.
The warmth of your hand and the cold gray sky, it fades to the distance. The image has gone over you and I, it means nothing to me. This means nothing to me.
Okay, Sona, so we got to the finale,
We sure did.
the name of which,
Yeah, I Googled it.
yeah, as did I.
I hate it when you have to Google the name, though. You know that.
I thought this one was very interesting, though, so I couldn't, fault it for that, at least. All right, so we're going to be discussing the finale, Sic Transit Gloria Mundi.
Yep.
Anything specifically in this episode you really liked, didn't like?
If anything, I would say what I didn't like is it just didn't have a finale kind of feeling to it, right? Like it just felt like a regular episode, which is okay.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a tragedy, but it just didn't have that feeling of like building to something or resolving something, or I don't know, just, that thing that keeps you hanging on to like, oh, I can't wait to see season 2 of this. I kind of felt like I could see season 2 of this. But I don't feel compelled to see season 2 of this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually told Kim the same thing. She asked me how it was because she's probably like 2 episodes behind now. She's actually been catching up this whole time, and she's been getting very into it. And then she asked me how it was, and I felt exactly the same way. I thought that this is like one of the best episodes they've had, but like not satisfying as a finale, because I would love this episode if I had another episode next week, but I don't want to wait a year for the next one. That's basically my opinion.
Right.
Season finale usually has some element of closure, and then, you know, with an additional mystery. And I feel like what you're implying there, we have more discoveries, more revelations about what we've already kind of assessed before, but there's really no closure on any of this.
I mean, we found out the Jackie situation. So there's that.
Yes, good point. Yes, so we do know that Jackie died, and we know how she died. She's not the one who was stalked and murdered in the opening segment.
So there's that.
It does imply concretely that we've kind of suspected for a while. You know, we now know that there's at least one more survivor, Lottie, right?
Yes.
And we know that there's like an origin of a cult there. Now, the question I have, and maybe this is a question, we know, maybe we'll start at the end and work our way backwards. But when I got to the end, I thought to myself, are we seeing people who theoretically, you know, like Jacques with the symbols inside the cabin, etc.? Is there a cult that existed that Jacques was part of? So maybe is there going to be a culture in the woods that they're going to become part of, and Lottie becomes their leader? Or is Lottie creating a cult, right? So theoretically, a lot of these people we're seeing in this cult might even be survivors of, you know, the survivors we've already met, and they're out and about doing whatever, nothing good apparently. And, you know, and of course they may have even acquired additional followers along the way.
Sure.
I mean, I think the show intentionally leaves it open-ended, but do you have any specific feeling?
You know, I hate the supernatural idea here, but it feels like Lottie has maybe tapped into something that is happening in the woods and then brings that home with her. And my guess is that she acquired additional followers. You know, here's the thing. You know, first of all, I hate the supernatural thing. I hate the idea that this is going towards like the others from Lost, that kind of situation. Also, we haven't seen that much of Lottie. Yeah. And I don't mind her. But a cult leader is generally super charismatic. Right. And that's how you become a cult leader, right? So like people just love being around you so much and they'll do whatever you say. And I mean, I'm not getting that charisma from Lottie. Right. So, I mean, maybe I'm just being a little cynical here, but I mean, obviously no one's in their right mind. They're all in a very stressful situation. It's not your typical like recruiting the suburban moms or whatever for a cult. Right. It's not like your typical cult situation, I guess, but like, I don't know. It's just not working for me, that whole thing.
I agree that the charisma thing's not working there. I think where she works, and not to criticize the actress, because we haven't seen that much of her work yet. You know, they haven't used
totally agree.
To maybe simultaneously criticize the way this is set up, but to give a little bit of credit, is that I don't think she's really working on the charisma side, but I think they've done a good job of making her enigmatic. And I think really what it comes down to is her visions, her predictions have come true.
Because, I mean, I think most cults are, I mean, they may theoretically be based on something supernatural, but in practicality, they really are not in reality. Whereas here, maybe there really is something.
Exactly. And that's what actually makes me suspect that there might be something else going on with her. It feels like the show is not saying that she is, starting to spew some kind of religious jargon and recruiting these girls to her. She's literally just saying stuff and then it happens the next day. And I think that is how she's going to build her cult. So, which tends to make me feel that this is probably going to lean into some kind of supernatural, direction.
Yeah, which I don't love, right? So that's my own dilemma personally.
I don't really mind the supernatural. I mean, especially with a show like this, to be totally honest, if this was going to be like a standalone thing, I find it way more interesting that this is all like in their minds, like it's all psychological, that if there's some kind of closure to it. But if this is going to drag on for years, I can't imagine them having any kind of mystery that's unraveling when it's all like they're all just crazy. It's like, well, how can you unravel that mystery for multiple seasons? It's just like, okay, well, I think we've established that they're nuts and let's move on, right? So.
Well, and maybe that's why I feel like I could watch season 2, but I don't have to watch season 2.
Right, because if it goes more in that mystery direction, you may not be satisfied.
That's just not my personal thing. Yeah.
Got it. So I had something that I watched this weekend. I haven't finished watching it yet, but maybe it won't be a recommendation for you given that turn.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get to that later. So as far as the episode itself, I thought that, there were pluses and minuses, but the big one for me was I thought that Christina Ricci as Misty, this is like a total great Misty episode.
Yes.
I love her pointers on disposing of the body. A torso is useless. Duh.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, fair point.
Exactly. It's like, some pointers for all the sociopaths out there. I also liked, I loved Shauna's interaction with Randy at the reunion.
Yes.
I like how she basically threatens his life. And then, so you're mad, he says.
I mean, when she means business, she means business.
And everything she says, by the way, he may be taking her metaphorically, but I think she's done all those things. So he should be a little more.
I agree.
And then, of course, she ends it with, her face kind of softens and she goes, "You're a good friend." Because, he did stand by Jeff, right? Jeff had this cockamamie plan and, Randy did stand by him. So I guess it's got, it's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm. I like the redemption of Jackie right before she meets her end. I think they have been showing her bad side this whole time, right? Yes. Her shallowness and her preoccupation with high school things, even when they're fighting for their lives, theoretically. All of a sudden, right, this thing that happened with the mushrooms and the attack on Travis and all of that has somehow snapped her into some sort of reality and perspective of how off the rails things have gotten. And all of a sudden, she's the voice of reason. And everyone's just looking blankly at her like, yes, so what? We almost killed this guy because we were all stoned out of our minds. I don't know. It was nice to have some redemption of her and her character, and that she does on some level have some idea of right and wrong, wanting people to understand that they are on the precipice of something that could be really, really ugly, even though that nobody wants to hear her.
Right. Even as I was taking notes, they're starting to pivot into this kind of more pseudo-religious groupthink. You see that some people are uncomfortable with this. Coach is kind of looking around, but he's not saying anything. He's kind of saying, okay, I don't want to be on the outside of this. This could be dangerous. It already got dangerous last night.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just sitting there with her arms crossed being like, huh. Even at this moment, I'm like, this is probably the end for Jack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, even as that's happening, I'm thinking to myself that she's really not being smart, how she's playing her cards here. But then, like you said, she turns the tables on them and goes, wait a second, hang on a second. What happened yesterday exactly, you crazy people? And you're going to pretend it never happened. And I was like, oh, good point, Jackie. Although, like you said, they don't want to hear it.
He did wasn't great, but compared to what these girls did, it was nothing.
Right. Although they were all high at the time. But still, that's...
they don't seem disturbed by the fact that they almost raped and murdered this guy, right?
Right.
And they're just kind of like, crap happens. So,
exactly.
And they don't want to really even acknowledge it. I mean, I'm sure we've all done things that we are embarrassed about when we're drunk or whatever, but you do know in your head that you did something that was not great, right?
Right.
And, somebody is probably going to make you admit it had you acted irrationally in some way. Someone's going to say, what the hell? You went off the rails last night. And you're going to have to own that. And nobody is owning it. Right. So, which just makes them more likely to, have this spot in their heads that well, this isn't that bad because I was out of my mind on mushrooms. It just opens the door to a slippery slope of permissiveness on things that are not okay, I feel.
I think that the show is aware of that. I think that, interestingly, to your point, I think that oftentimes, especially when you're younger, you're in a circumstance where you're definitely in the wrong, but you probably won't, in this case, they're not going to admit it, right? So it's not even like they're just suddenly, and there is, the next morning when the snowstorm has come through, there is that moment where you see not only Shauna, but everybody's kind of upset that they allowed this to happen. And because I think at some fundamental level, there is some guilt that they were in the wrong, right? But yeah, it's too late. Jackie's done.
The group think has taken over.
Exactly. Yep.
There are starting to be consequences for it. And I also liked it, apart from that, the argument between Shauna and Jackie, which was a long time coming about their friendship and and what it is to each of them and how each of them feels about it. And that was like a lot of stuff that had been going unsaid that needed to be said, and done in a very realistic teenage girl way, I felt. So I like that also.
Yeah, I literally wrote down that, seeing that conversation was very good. It was like one of the high points of the episode. And it made me think about my sister conversations she had, had with her friends back in that time. Maybe think about, that kind of time in your life when you kind of make some not great decisions, let's say. And also maybe think about like, maybe worry because I have a daughter. So that's in the offing at some point.
Teenage girls are brutal, man.
Yes. I mean, this is proof of it in this show, right? But what I was going to say about that as well is I did think that was very interesting to hear that conversation, because it's something that the show maybe can explore even more in the future. I don't think it's really delved into it that much, but I do think that psychology of friendship when you're like a teenager, and maybe specifically from a female perspective, even more so, that it's this idea, exactly what's playing out between Shauna and Jackie, right? Shauna is calling out all these toxic dynamic between them, but Shauna, I'm sure, until recently, has happily participated because she wanted to be in with the popular girl. And Jackie, who is probably not being cruel to Shauna, she probably really does love Shauna, but the fact that she is, has this entitlement that she gets to be alpha in the group.
She's the queen bee. Yeah.
Exactly. And she just takes full advantage of that. And of course, I think this is what happens in many relationships. So I thought that was interesting. That it was well done, I thought.
Yes.
After disposing of the body, they all show up at
all cleaned up. Yeah.
And the needle drop where they get slow motion, they all walk in together and they play You Got to Keep Them Separated by which is not the name of that song, but I can't remember the name of that song by
Offspring, yeah.
But I was like, yeah, you got to keep these girls separated, you get it together.
They murder people.
They're murdering people. Yeah, exactly. It's like what they do when they're in a group. So yeah, at all costs, please keep these women separated. I mean, to that point of them, like, this is what they do when they get together. Shauna even says that Natalie asks her if she knows what she's doing. She goes, yeah, it's just like riding like a sick bicycle.
Yep.
Disposing of Adam's body. Pretty grisly, by the way. This is probably as grisly as we've seen it, other than the very first episode, obviously.
Yeah.
What did you think about Van and Ty's conversation in the past?
Well, first of all, I thought, who would be in their right mind after getting clawed by a wolf? Like, I mean, I think objectively speaking, Taissa is on the right side of this, that like, your face was torn off and you were attacked by a wolf. Like, who knows what your mind can do during a time like that. So I get where she's coming from. Pleading ground for Van, who you see right at the end, being part of this with Lottie, because there is something bigger out there in her mind. Possibly Taissa, right? From what we see in the current day.
Yeah.
Going on, which was quite grim.
Yeah. We definitely have to talk about that.
So, I mean, definitely setting up the idea of, who knows at what point Taissa came around to this idea of there being something out there. But apparently, at least on some level, I don't know if it's even consciously or subconsciously, but she does believe something. So maybe this is the start of it, right?
Yeah, I think that's really what we're seeing there at the end. Oh, and by the way, going back to the title, not only is that, sic transit Gloria Mundi, that's what the Pope says when he becomes the Pope, like as part of the ceremony.
Thus passes the glory of the world.
Right. So it's you can read that as the end of the world, like the world will end at some point, but it's also for the Pope. It's the Pope, his like relinquishing, worldly things. Beyond that, it's also, I think it's the fact that, he's being made into a Pope. So I think we're also seeing that this is Lottie in this episode becoming like the, cult leader, right? This is her becoming like, whether it's something that is she being chosen for this, or once again, is she just, someone who may or may not have this skill and is just power hungry. It remains to be seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to what you said about Ty in the present day. So first of all, how big is this house? Like, there's this very, very large area that apparently is not being explored here.
Well, in fairness, I don't like to spend much time in the basement. New Jersey basements do have a sketchy feeling to them, right? So,
but that was like, it looks like it's like a grating, and then beyond the grating, there's a, you definitely have like duct work inside of but it looks like that part of the house. And maybe this is what it turns out to be. It doesn't look like this is just a normal duct in the house. It looks like that is a whole section of the house that is walled off, made to look like a duct, because then you can like stand up in there. I mean, it's like a 10-foot ceiling in there. It's crazy.
No,
That's like,
that was very strange. When I saw it, I thought it was like some sort of fireplace in the basement.
Yeah.
Like that didn't make much sense. And then, yeah, when she started climbing in, I expected her to be in some sort of a duct, like. Right. She was going to have to be on her stomach. I was kind of like, wow, this lady is not claustrophobic if she's going to climb in there. But then, yeah, it ends up being a whole other room. So yeah. I do agree that is very, very weird. And also, no matter how little you go in the basement, at least when you moved in, right? Wouldn't you
exactly
notice at that point when the house is empty, you'd kind of be like, what is that about? Unless you just never open the grate because you're afraid there's going to be creatures in there, which I could see myself doing.
Yeah, that's why I mean, like, unless this is like some kind of design mistake by the set decorators, that it's like something intentional there, that whole area of the house is walled off intentionally. I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose. It's probably was there before. But it makes it seem that way, right? Like, in other words, if I was in the, like you said, if I was in the basement and I saw a duct, I wouldn't climb in there unless there was some problem with it. But to open it up, assuming that there's a duct in there, and also being like, wait, why is there this blood stain here? Let me open this up, and probably thinking you're going to stick your head in and see something like a dead rat or something inside the duct, and then find a whole other part of the house. You're like, what the hell is going on? And maybe that's the intention that she's having this experience. And of course, what she finds is really grim, like the beheading of it. I mean, this is serious stuff.
Oh, that poor puppy. Like, I'm not even a dog person, but that was rough. Okay.
rough. So my question to you is, do you think that Taissa, this is all her work, or do you think are these zealots doing some of this? So Taissa definitely has her night terror. She has her dirt eating and, her sleepwalking. So we know that happens when she's stressed out. She's aware of this, right? And we've seen it when she's younger, that this even happened before the plane crash, but of course very stressful when she's in the plane crash, and now stressful again when all these things are coming back into the light. But do you think that she's done all this, that she's like going around murdering dogs during her sleepwalk, which would imply maybe some kind of evil spirit? Or do you think that maybe these zealots have been holed up in her house, like living in there, and they are doing some of the stuff like painting spill on the outside to mess with her? Maybe this is Lottie controlling them, or having them do some of these things. What do you?
It had not occurred to me that it could be anyone except her. So I had just assumed that she was doing it all on her own. And last week, you were the one that raised the idea that she murdered the dog. So you thought she was capable of it last week.
You know what? The only reason I've pivoted away from that is that I'm not thinking about it from the point of view of what they've shown us, because I think they definitely want to lead us to believe that. I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of the show. Like, if she becomes some kind of zombie monster that and she's keeping the secret from them, then I mean, I guess you could do something interesting with that, but I will find like there's a relatively small group of characters we're following from week to week, and I think that this is making one of them a sleepwalking zombie psychopath. It would be problematic, I think, for the show, but maybe not. Maybe she is like almost like a sleeper agent, no pun intended, and or maybe pun intended. Maybe that's part of the mechanics of next season. It just seemed like it's a lot to try to fit into the show.
I feel like it could work.
It's all crazy. I can only imagine what is her wife about to do right now when she makes a discovery, and she just won this election. Like, what's going to happen now? Like, that's a crazy circumstance to be in.
Well, I don't know if I'm reading into it too much, but it did seem like there was some evil look that passed across Ty's face when she won the election, no?
They definitely imply, especially cutting from like the beheaded dog to that face,
right?
That you are, concerned that, especially if she's doing this without any knowledge of it herself, because that basically means that she could be the most loving wife in the world and murder her spouse in the middle of the night because she's completely unaware of what she's doing.
I mean, kind of seems like that's what she was worried would happen, and that's why she ordered them to get out of the house, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely.
So in that way, it would support that she is subconsciously doing things, and she knows on some level that something really bad's happening.
You're absolutely right that if she's telling them you have to leave right now, we don't know what her history is with these episodes. So
Right.
maybe she knows she's dangerous in these circumstances. So you make a good point. My biggest irritation with this episode was Misty releasing her prisoner to only then go and, do you think she killed her with those cigarettes, or do you think that she's
absolutely.
Now, what I think is crazy about that, if Misty's going to kill her, then Misty should just kill her, instead of being like, I'm going to let her go and maybe she'll take the cigarettes or maybe not. Like that whole thing was just bizarre.
It was like a real confidence in the behavior of a smoker.
Yeah.
That she was going to notice that the cigarettes were gone before she left the house.
Right.
And tell her to retrieve them. I think I personally would be so excited to get out of that house. I'd be like, screw it, I'll go to 7-Eleven.
Exactly.
But we just get the hell out of here. So
that was my irritation was honestly, I was a smoker. If I have not smoked for weeks, I probably would be over my addiction. That's the first thing. And second of all was that, even to that point, exactly like you said, I am not eating or smoking or anything this woman gives me unless I absolutely have to, like in the circumstance of like, you're in her house, you have to. But that still doesn't make sense because she could have easily poisoned her with the tea. She literally gave her tea like that morning. So she could have poisoned her then, with something that was more slow acting to before she left the house. And what's the point of letting her drive into the out to die? Like, I don't understand.
Well, now she doesn't have to get rid of the body.
Right. But then there's going to be questions if this woman is out in, with her car. Her car's been parked in front of Misty's house for weeks. And
like, speaking of suburban New Jersey, like, how did she not get a ticket or get towed or like
exactly.
Like in our neighborhood growing up, we got plenty of tickets just because someone stayed at the house past 2 a.m. You'd get a ticket. Like, I don't know.
That's why I wonder. At first, I was like, this is really, really stupid. But then in retrospect, I'm thinking, did she do something else? Did she give her, like some crazy hallucinogenic or something, let's say, and she's going to end up being under observation. And then she's going to have all this story to tell about how she was abducted. And they're going to be like, this woman's crazy, right? So I wonder if this is not a murder because, I mean, I definitely felt at first she definitely killed her. But then I'm like, why? Well, she could have killed her 15 times over. She could have just left her in the basement and let her die down there and fed her to her cat. She doesn't have a cat. She's a bird.
Trouble of disposing of the body.
I mean, and not only that, she could have easily killed her now if she wanted to, and then called the girls up and been like, you're going to go and dispose of this body for me too. And they'd be like, no, we're not. And she's like, yes, you are, because I just did it for you. You're going to do it for me, period. Right. So none of this makes sense that she actually killed her. And like I said, to have her literally drive away from her house 3 blocks away, and the cops are going to show up and be like, where did this car come from? I obviously came from up the street. And then they'll start like whatever, knocking on doors, and they'll be like, yeah, that car was parked 2 blocks away for like two months. I guess it's only been days, actually. It has not been.
Yeah, I don't think it's still.
I mean, when you consider we have an election and then, they had Halloween near the beginning of this episode and the beginning of the show, this has literally been like 2 weeks that this show's been on.
Yeah.
So, just like Dexter, 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know how suburban neighborhoods are. If there's a car parked in front of someone's house for 2 weeks, everyone in the neighborhood knows about it. So
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we literally have someone moved in just recently. We know their car. They have a Tesla. There's a Mercedes SUV that's parked there on the weekends. So we know exactly when the boyfriend's over because we see the car. So it's like it's the chatter of the neighborhood. We have nothing else to talk about. So I really find it
exactly how it works.
2 things I wanted to talk about still, and this is all about the reunion. One is I loved, was it Allie? I love, it's just such a specific representation, first of all, of her with that very Italian accent. I think we know people like that, although it's more of a caricature, but there definitely is, we know what the kind of character it is of, I should say. Yeah. And the second thing is I just love that type of character in general, in real life, where she's like, we went through this trauma, and she's making it all about her trauma. It's just like, you went through this trauma. Sure.
Right.
And then that montage with the Enya song playing, which was like so 90s.
Yes.
Which is crazy that you would do that, right? Like, think about how traumatic this is to these survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, one more question I have for you, because we didn't see anybody at the reunion. I was actually expecting one of the twists would be we would see some of these additional survivors at the reunion. I'm surprised that they didn't have that. So my question to you is, do you still think there are more survivors than we're seeing here? Obviously, including Lottie, but anybody else that hasn't been called out. Here's the thing. On the one hand, you could say, well, they weren't at the reunion. On the other hand, if I survived that, I'm like, if a coach or something, I'd be like, I'm not going to that friggin' reunion. Well, thank you.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah, I feel like there are more. What do you think?
I'm pretty sure they have to, right? They're going to open this up. And I think that they intentionally, because once again, we don't know if they didn't know probably at the time whether there was going to be a season 2, etc. Like, why cast these people to intentionally leave things vague? And then let's say you introduce a bunch of actors in the last episode. Now you have to like re-sign those actors. In this case, they can literally just introduce a whole batch of new people next season, and we won't even know who they are. I definitely think that that's going to be the case. And it's very easy, like I said, to be like, I'm surprised you didn't go to the reunion. And the person would just be like, what are you talking about? It's the last thing I wanted to do, right? Yeah. And there's very convenient way to like not have to bring them into the show too early, right?
Agree.
Plus, at my gut, I actually think some of these people who were followers, like Van, for example, I would not be surprised at all to find out that Van is alive and in Lottie's camp, right?
Yeah, where is Javi, though?
Yes, I don't know. And we see all 3 of those pictures in the frame in the...
Yeah.
But does that mean that he died? Or does that mean that they're just, because would they have put...
alive until very recently, so I don't think it means that he died, but where is he?
Yeah, I felt the same way. It's like, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, is that a memorial, like a shrine? But I'm like, exactly that. It's like, well, Travis just died. So it'd be weird that they were like, make sure we put Travis' picture in there before the reunion.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems,
Oh, what did you think about the bear? I mean, we totally passed that. I mean, this is one of the things that kind of like, not only is the bear like the sacrifice that, the heart of the bear is the first sacrifice that's going to go to this like woodland god, whatever it is. Like, how strange was that? I mean, it could just be a sick bear, but Lottie's behavior, and also the fact that Lottie was, confident that they were not going to be hungry for long. Then again, that's very vague too, and that, the way she described that. So
I don't know much about bears, but it did not seem to be very bear-like behavior.
No, definitely not.
So, but like, what are the options here? The bear was sick. The bear was possessed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't like any of the alternatives. Like this, where like I get turned off from the whole situation.
If you think it's supernatural, it turns you off.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making about just story construction and what is more viable. I get it, but it's just, again, like, it's just not my personal thing.
Right.
I would rather the bear was acting like a bear. So,
right. But then she wouldn't have had much of a fighting chance. I can't imagine like her out there, fighting the bear with a knife and taking it down. Then she really should be like, a warrior goddess at that point.
Hey, like just 24 hours later, now they can eat Jackie. So, I mean, right? Like either way.
And they can store her away if the snow stays. They they can refrigerate her too.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I was going to ask you that too. I mean, do you think they would be willing to? They just killed a bear. They have plenty of meat around. Are they going to eat Jackie, or what do you think? Is that going to be?
They'll get high on some more mushrooms and they'll eat Jackie.
Why not? Don't want to waste that meat. It's a long winter.
I mean, this is the whole that soccer team in the Andes.
Right.
Like that's how it happened for them. Is that people happened to die, and then.
But they didn't have a bear around that they could eat.
Yeah, I mean that bear should last a long time, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of meat.
Yeah. So.
Oh, and one more thing was I liked the whole sequence towards the end of the episode. Jeff and Shauna have like bonded over this murder now, and they're making jokes about that cat better stay on your good side or he's going to end up inside the stew.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And then the daughter shows up and she's like, "What's going on?"
No, and she sees that Adam is missing.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like,
Yeah. And I love that whole like tableau at the end. Jeff is awkwardly, because he knows who Adam is too. I'm sure Shauna kind of was all out saying like, that the daughter met him at this Halloween party, etc. I mean, I'm sure that's all out on the table now. It's interesting that like, he's kind of like, oh, hey. And you kind of see him looking sideways at the daughter. And the daughter's just kind of staring at the screen, but she's thinking like, what the hell's going on? And Shauna comes out and is like, oh, here's some popcorn. But it's like kind of like an awkward interaction. So the whole thing is like very, very strange.
Yep.
A little awkward, a little more awkward family tension.
A little bit.
Oh, geez. Anything you've seen? I've seen a whole bunch of things. So I have some things I can talk to you about.
I have not seen much because I've been trying to catch up on all the stuff I neglected while I wasn't feeling well. So, yeah, you go ahead. Let's hear it.
Well, one is Scream. I know you're interested in that one.
Yes.
So yeah, I saw the Scream movie this weekend. I dropped the review. So if anyone wants to hear a full review, which includes spoilers, by the way, check out our most recent episode. And in that same episode, Sona and I talk about, she had just recently rewatched Scream 1 and 2, the original Scream 1 and 2. This one's called Scream 2 also. I almost said Scream 2, just to confuse things even further. This is also called just Scream, but it's not the original Scream. Sona had originally seen the 1996 25-year anniversary Scream and its sequel from 97. Speaking of the 90s, by the way, look at this 90s Renaissance, 25th anniversary of Scream, 25th anniversary of this class reunion in YellowJackets. The 90s are coming back.
That's right.
And I also something else which I'll touch on briefly, which is a show called Archive 81 or Archive 18. I forget what it's called. It's on Netflix. It's a horror show that just dropped this week, and it also takes place in the 90s. So there you go, 90s all over the place.
That one.
Oh, I'll recommend it to you. Maybe you'll be curious about it. It's interesting enough to watch. It's my opinion. Okay. But anyway, so with Scream, I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it's definitely the best of the sequels. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was really good. I would say, if you don't like slash movies, if you don't like Scream at all, this is not going to convert anybody. I really doubt it. But I think if you are a fan of the series, and, like I said, I am an apologist even for the worst of them, I find them mildly entertaining, like total comfort watch. I can put on Scream 3 even, which is my least favorite of them all, and just put it on and it's fine. I enjoy the mystery aspect of it. I enjoy the jokes and like the little meta commentary. I enjoy all that stuff. This Scream is the best of all the sequels. So it's definitely worth watching if you are a Scream.
Good to know.
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to recommend or mention, I'll recommend it too, is also takes place in the 90s. It's called Archive 81. Mm-hmm. It's on Netflix. It's a horror series. It's only 8 episodes long. It is based on a podcast, loosely based on a podcast, which I know nothing about this podcast, by the way. But and James Wan, the guy who recently made Malevolent, the crazy, crazy Malevolent movie, and he's very successful. He made like the Aquaman movie. He made the Saw movies originally. He's made a lot of horror movies, and he's gone mainstream as well. He made one of the Fast and Furious movies. So he has been very successful, but he still has his fingers in horror content, and he has this Archive 81 show which he's producing. This show is just interesting enough for me to follow through. And what's interesting about it is that he just made Malevolent, which if anyone's seen that, I don't think it's a good movie, by the way, but it is one of the best movie going experiences you can watch. It's available on HBO Max. I do recommend it. It is one of the craziest, most absolutely crazy, in your face, every 5 minutes something absolutely bananas is happening in that movie. And this show is the exact opposite, but it made it very watchable for me. The lead actor, Mamadou Athie, who's been in a bunch of things recently. I think he's like kind of an up and comer. He's actually going to be in some big movies coming up soon. Interesting performer. There's something not like very traditional in the way that he performs, but it is compelling in its own way. However, there's also a female protagonist. He's restoring videotapes from 1994 who were taken by this other actress whose character played called Melanie, and the actress is Dina Shahabi, who is this woman. And he's restoring these videotapes. So there's this mystery occurring where he's in the present day and he starts finding out that his history is intertwined with the history in these tapes, which makes this kind of interesting parallel story going on. And it gets kind of weird and metaphysical. And I haven't finished it, but I'm very, very close to the end. I don't think it's great, but just the fact that it's this kind of almost this creepy tone to it, and him restoring these videotapes and making these kind of discoveries of this mystery and the ongoing mystery. It's like every episode they add another layer to this mystery. It made it very compelling to watch, even though it's probably not great, a fun watch in its own way. It's the exact opposite of Malevolent. It is not like full of crazy twists and gore and all this nuttiness. It's actually more about this kind of sustained mystery. But I did think it was interesting. But to that point, I would almost recommend it for you, Sona, because I think it's the type of thing that you might find compelling to watch, even though you may not land it in the end. Yeah, the finale might. But it does go in a supernatural direction. That's why it might be the only turn off for you. But I would still recommend you should give it a shot and like watch the first couple episodes and see if you get drawn in, because I do like a mystery, and I did think its mystery kept me intrigued as it went along. And that's the other thing I watched. And one more thing, so many things. I cannot believe this is January, and so many things dropped this week, just this week, that I wanted to talk about. And the last thing I watched is the new Denzel Washington MacBeth movie, which the Coen brothers, or one of the Coen brothers directed, Joel Coen, and starring Denzel Washington as MacBeth, and Lady MacBeth is played by Frances McDormand, who's Joel Cohen's wife. They both give great performances. It's really, really incredible visuals. It's stagey and simultaneously very cinematic, and it's very interesting, just stylistically very interesting to look. And it's been in theaters since Christmas, but it is now available on Apple Plus. So anybody who has Apple, you guys can watch that, and I do highly recommend that, especially if you are a fan of the MacBeth play. Definitely an interesting version of that for sure. I know Joel is a Denzel fan, so maybe something for you guys to track down.
Yeah, for sure.
So that is it. Did you have the only last thing I wanted to talk about possibly is, did you have any follow-ups on Dexter? Anything?
Well, I did not, but I actually just watched it again yesterday because my husband was watching it, and he was quite dissatisfied.
Yes. Well, maybe we'll talk about that real quickly. That the first thing I find fascinating is that, and I don't know if I mentioned this in one of the previous recaps or not, but the fan reaction has been horrible to this episode. As bad as the reaction was to the first Dexter finale, this one's even worse. And people are, for example, they are trying to continue this new blood, quote unquote, is Harrison, right, with Dexter in there as Ghost Dexter or some other, but that's the plan right now. And everyone's basically saying, like, I will not watch a show with Harrison. Right. Oh, and last thing I want to mention, because I've been wanting to mention it to you multiple times, but I had done the research, and indeed, according to all the message boards, and I've done my own research to verify this, Dexter did not use ketamine in original recipe Dexter. He used M99, which is also an animal tranquilizer. So I do not understand how these writers made this mistake. And I don't know if it's just laziness or what it is, because how do you get this so wrong where you could easily have used M99, another animal tranquilizer, and it could be still available from the vet. And then to be like, well, yeah, it's just another animal tranquilizer, and it's probably more commonplace nowadays, so that makes more sense. But then for it to be like the linchpin of, literally she types in ketamine and Bay Harbor Butcher, and that's what comes up, and it's like there is no ketamine in those murders. So what is going on? Like, what a stupid self-inflicted wound.
Really weird inconsistency issue there. Yeah, really weird.
Long story short, I was pretty unsatisfied with the Dexter finale. Most people are, and I don't know if they're going to be able to keep this thing alive. I think they're going to try to, because they had a hugely successful ratings-wise show. I mean, just so people, if anyone's unaware, this was the biggest ratings for any Showtime show in history, any season of any show, and that included. So I'm hard pressed to believe they're not going to try to make a Harrison show. Even if they get a quarter of that audience, it's probably a hit for them. So I don't know. I'm pretty certain I'm not. Let's just say that. Yeah. Unless they do a crossover with you, then I might just watch both shows out of curiosity. By the way, one of the executive producers on this new Dexter show is also one of the executive producers on the You show. So there you go. Shared DNA right there. And he is heading to California. So hey, you never know. Oh, but for next week, we'll be doing a preview of our next binge watch, The After Party, on Apple Plus. And we'll also talk about how you could watch this thing if you don't have Apple Plus, or maybe you have Apple Plus and don't realize it, etc. So how can you watch the show, and a little bit about the show itself for that After Party, which is coming on the 28th. And we'll talk to you soon.